Here we go. Well, here we are with episode 8 of I've Known You Too Long. My guest today is kind of a big deal for me. My guest today is Kevin Seconds from the band 7 Seconds. And he was nice enough to agree to come in and sit with me while he was up in Seattle for one of his acoustic shows. And so I'm just going to get right into it right now with him. Hello, Kevin.
Hello, Dave.
Kevin, I've known you too long.
Yeah, and I'm bumping into your microphone.
That's all right. So with everybody else that I've had on the show so far, the I've known you too long thing, these are people that have been pretty close to me. And I've said, I've known you too long. I've known you so long. I can't remember when we met exactly.
Right.
With you, I know.
Okay.
And
see, I was thinking about this coming up here. I was going, you know, some people that I've known for years, I'll go back and go, I don't remember how we met.
That's unfortunately at our advanced ages, that's getting more common.
Yeah, that's true. Amen.
No, so I first became aware of you when I was a 16-year-old skateboarder. Mm-hmm. I got into skateboarding at 15. Got a skateboard for Christmas, 1986, I guess.
Wow.
Was when I was skating, and right away we were getting into all the punk rock and everything. And I was already into Suicidal and the Sex Pistols and heard some Generation X. But the town I grew up in didn't really have any access to even getting like Maximum Rock and Roll or zines where we could order stuff. Every once in a while we'd get a Thrasher magazine, you know. So we're skating. It's a couple months in. Get in the car with some guys that we just met downtown. They're going to take us to a skate spot. And someone plugs in a cassette tape, and it's Walk Together, Rock Together.
Oh, nice.
And I'm floored. Like, and so it's the first couple songs, and I'm sitting there, and then it gets to 99 Red Balloons, and I turn to my buddy, John Dodd. If you're listening, John, I remember this. And I said, who is this? And he says, oh, this is 7 Seconds. So I'm like, you know, I'm just saying it over and over to myself, like 7 Seconds. I got to remember this.
Right.
This is something else. And it's you know, it was the first thing that was kind of an immediate. I wasn't laughing at it because I thought I saw your mommy and your mommy's dead was funny, or you know what I mean, or these guys are, what are these guys saying? I'm an anarchist. It was hitting something else.
Nice.
So, and you've heard all this stuff before, I'm sure. So I'm not trying to
never get sick of it.
Oh, good, because you can get some of it from me.
That's I love it. It's very sweet. I appreciate that.
So, like I said, didn't have any way to get any money, or didn't have any way to get any records. Didn't really have much money. I got a cassette tape, and I took it to my friend at school, my friend Matt Glenovich, and I said, "Hey man," because he had all kinds of stuff, all kinds of music, and I said, "Get me some 7 Seconds. I really want that 7 Seconds." He said, "Oh, I will." So over the weekend, he records this tape for me. He brings it back Monday morning. He says, "I got the new 7 Seconds. I recorded that for you."
Oh, funny.
So I got New Wind, thinking I was getting Walk Together, Rock Together, which I had heard one time. And this is a place where I part ways with a lot of people who I guess, you know, have a different opinion of New One than I do. It's my favorite record. Like, because that was what I was looking for, and I took it home, and I didn't, you know, I remembered the songs. I'm like, well, those songs aren't on here, but this is great, you know?
Wow.
So then that began it was an immediate, my favorite band. A couple months later, I saw Minor Threat Graffiti, and the same guy that recorded me the tape, I said, what's Minor Threat? He said, oh, that's another band you're really going to like. Because he totally knew. He knew what I was all about.
I'm just impressed that you'd heard of us before Minor Threat. I think that's really funny.
and rapidly, that all became common knowledge to everybody. Right. It was just the way things were expanding. We were just this corner in the corner of the country, by the Canadian border. No, you know, this is all so far pre-internet. And so, you know, we weren't in any kind of a tour stop really or anything. Yeah. We weren't getting to Seattle because we didn't have driver's licenses yet. This like within a year we were driving to Seattle to real record stores like Fallout Records, and then everything was the world was wide open.
Yeah,
you know,
of course.
So a couple years later, I get to come see you guys. I saw Circle Jerks, 7 Seconds, Alphabet Swill, and SGM Community World Theater in Tacoma, 1988.
Yeah, it was a great show.
It was a good show.
And there are rumors that Kurt Cobain was at that show.
Oh, that's highly likely.
That's like that. You know, I've heard people go, you know who was at that show? And I was like, I've heard Kurt Cobain was there. It's like
I wasn't really aware of him at the time. It was like another.
Of course, yeah. I wasn't
It was another year or two before that was a name that people knew. But he was. I mean, surely he was coming up.
No, I think it was before he was like, playing really, maybe he was just starting with Nirvana or something. But
it was June of '88.
Is that what? Yeah, because we started a tour. That's right. Yes, and we did the whole summer tour with them. Nice. Circle Jerks.
I also fell in love with SGM because I didn't really.
I still have the flyer for that show. It's funny. You said I just
remember
have
their LP somewhere in this room.
That's great.
It's not as politically correct as things came to be later on. It's definitely got some interesting lyrics in there. But it was a big deal for me at the time.
Yeah.
So that show was a big deal. We didn't actually meet. I was just a kid in the crowd.
Mm-hmm.
So then I started writing you. I started doing a zine. Started doing Excursion fanzine, and at one point I wrote some stuff about how 7 Seconds had affected me. Stupidly, I felt old. I was like 22, and I felt like I was an old man, so I was reminiscing about my childhood.
That's great.
But you understand because you wrote a song called 7 Years.
Mm-hmm.
So you understand. I mean, that's I think at the time I was even thinking like, wow, it's been 7 years since I heard 7 Seconds. It's like that song, So
yeah, sure.
So I sent you that, and I believe you wrote me back, and it was that was very, very nice. But I never had a chance to actually meet you face to face.
Right.
Now I'm not going to put you on the spot to ask if you remember when we actually met face to face.
I don't.
But you'll remember it when I tell you.
Yeah, tell me because because in my mind, and I know we go back, and I remember the zine and stuff. But for me, it's always nowadays. It's like. I think we just only sort of officially met on Facebook. That's how I think.
Oh,
and I know it's not that, but
here's what it is. 7 Seconds played the Java Jump in Fife.
Okay.
I think it was
with Knapsack.
Yes, with Knapsack. That's the piece I couldn't remember. Was that 96?
That would have been about right, yeah.
96.
Yeah.
Tim McIntosh from Trial walks me up to you and he says, "Kevin, this is Dave from Excursion." See, that's it. And you said something very nice to me to let me know that you remember who I was.
And I see now I can kind of remember that. Like I can vaguely remember, that exchange. That's the thing. I need the trigger.
Oh yeah, and then from that point, and that was all. I mean, and Tim knew how much I loved the band, and he knew that was. I had said he was from Sacramento.
Yeah,
and he knew you from there, I guess, and the coffee shop and stuff, I guess, would have already open. So, So after that, when you guys would come play, I just come up and say hello. Mm-hmm. And so that's been common. But I don't know the exact date, but most of these podcasts, we can't get it down to a handshake or a hello.
Yeah.
And I know that's the day we actually met and looked at each other and said, "Hello, I know who you are."
Right. Well, and then yesterday when you walked up, I immediately knew who you were, but and I know that there's history. I'm like, I see your profile thing, and
sure.
I don't know what that says about me, but it's funny because I've thrown people off. Like they'll go, you like, what do you read my posts? I was like, well, yeah. I mean, it's not like I'm just like, no, of course not. Why would I do that? Silly.
Yeah. I think when you said that, I said, "Did you really recognize me, or is it Facebook?" Which is totally fine. But so the point of establishing, so what we do in this podcast is we establish where we met, and then we go back from there, and I try to figure out how you became a person that I would have met. Like, because most of the people that I meet are from this crazy music scene,
right? And
I'm very interested on how people on the paths that people took to get there from all the way back.
Sure.
And then after that, once we get back up to that point, we can go forward and talk about stuff that has happened since or any interesting things.
Way, whatever you.
All right, so man, where did you come from? How does someone become you?
I was born in Sacramento, California, 54 years ago, and my dad was a cop. My mom was, she was a teacher. She'd been a lot of things, but she was doing teaching. And then when she had me, she sort of had to just be a mom. I was the first kid in a family, 3 of us. And we moved around a ton. And my dad was always sort of just a workaholic and he was just very restless, fairly conservative. My mom was just on the opposite end. She was like educated in Berkeley and hippie and feminist and fairly political and kind of a little rebel, and I think maybe the opposites just sort of that's why they got together. But
So he was a straight up like political conservative, and she was a hippie from Berkeley?
Yeah. In fact,
wow.
My dad arrested my mom. It was at some sort of protest, and she actually fell and broke her arm, and he went to visit her in the hospital. She went to the hospital, and they were looking at it, and he felt for her, and then must have had the hots for or something, and then they like that. Yeah, it was kind of
so your dad was a cop.
Yep.
I heard you say that last night, and I don't think I had ever heard that before.
Yeah. He was a cop for a number of years. My dad was like a World War II hero, and he had Purple Heart. He'd had some head injuries, and I mean he was okay, but he'd had shrapnel in his head and that he still had till he died.
What theater?
I think it was. I guess it was just Germany, and I mean he was. I'm not totally certain that was like one of those things where. I used to boast to my friends, he's got medals, but I had no idea what that meant. Or
right.
And I also sort of rebelled, because of, I was 10 when my parents divorced, and I was so close to my mom. My father was never very active in my life. He was sort of like, when I started to have an interest in like sports, I wanted to try out for Little League, and he couldn't be bothered. My mom was like, I'll take you down and we'll try it. And she'd, I'd make the team and she'd bring cupcakes to the team. She was really into that. And then when it came to art and music and, all the other crazy stuff, she was always there. And my dad was always just like, he was an affectionate, loving father, but he was just into his own thing. So they split up and got a divorce when I was 10. And my mom raised the three of us kids. And we went through just, there was no child support. He moved back to the Midwest where he's from. And
was he a cop this whole time? Because you said you moved around a lot. Was he moving to different precincts, or was he keeping that job?
He was. It was a weird guy. He was a cop in some small cities in Northern California, Lincoln, California, Cotati, California, were really small places, Santa Rosa. And then he would like stop for a while, and then he became a welder. Like he was a welder for a while, and then he went back into being a cop in Sacramento. His brothers and he had there were generations of cops, like all these old Italian dudes were cops in Sacramento. But he decided he wanted to retire and start his own security agency or security business. So when he and my mother, he had retired from being a cop, and he was just doing this security thing, which I still don't know what he did, or you know what I mean. Like, did he sit in a car and secure a parking lot? I have no idea. I sort of lost interest in my father when I just realized he wasn't very interested in my life. So
right.
I mean, of course, when they first told us they were getting a divorce, I thought it was the end of the world. I couldn't even imagine what that meant for us.
How old were you? 10?
10, yeah, going on 11. And, I had a younger brother and sister, Steve, Youth, my little brother. We have a middle sister, lives in New York. And it was just, at first it was kind of cool because it was like, well, at least we're going with the cool parent, and she's, but that meant that, we're talking the early 70s. And just living on welfare, and we were homeless for a while. When we lived in Sacramento, we were sort of moving all over the place, living in crappy apartments and that kind of thing. And then we had some friends that had lived in Reno and said, there's tons of work in Reno. You can go up there and work and live and make a. So my mom was like, well, let's do it. So she packed up the car. We went up there, lived out of motel rooms for like the first 6 months, just crappy motels. Yeah. And she got a job at a McDonald's. I had just turned 16. I got a job at the same McDonald's. And
you were working with your mom at McDonald's in Reno.
Yeah, and I was helping. I would just turn over the check to her just to help her pay rent. And, it was pretty grim for a while. It was pretty hardcore, yeah.
Did you guys have, in terms of the authority of the positions at the McDonald's, were you, was she like a manager over you?
She became a manager fairly quickly because she'd had experience. I delivered newspapers. Grit newspaper, just whatever I could do to make a buck.
Wait, did you deliver Grit?
I did.
So those ads in the comic books back in the day that said "sell Grit for money," you are the only person I know who has ever told me they did it, and that means you've actually seen a Grit before.
Yes, yeah, and I was so into anything that when I was a kid where it said you can make money by sending a self-addressed. I would just send it, and I would just sell anything because as a kid when you get your first few dollars somebody hands to you for doing whatever, you're just like, Wow, independence, you know, and you get.
I could buy my own candy.
That's it, and that's what that's what I did. But yeah, I sold grit, and I sold
saving up for a Slurpee.
Back when $1 could get you candy, a Coke, you could have you'd be set up for the afternoon,
So candy has played a big role in my life.
Yeah.
And I tell people that it was really frustrating to me. Like the first time my mind kind of I just seized up on something, got really angry, was when they changed the price of candy bars so they weren't 25 cents anymore.
Right.
You couldn't get 4 for $1.
Right.
That's
Isn't that nuts?
That's crazy to talk to people now.
Just that you remember that there was candy for 25 cents.
Yeah.
Candy bar.
I could get 4 Snickers bars. Think about it. That's a lot,
And your kid, man, it's like, I remember we just mow lawns all day long or go help, clean up. There's an old gas station by these apartments we lived in. This guy Hutch ran it. Just this old, guy that looked like Kojak. And he would just let us, we'd clean up all the oil and and we'd do all of the grunt work, and then he'd give us $1 each. And $1 was amazing. And we'd go over to the 7-Eleven, and, sometimes I'd go between maybe get a couple candy bars and a soda and then some gum or, it's funny to think that was so,
and it was a big deal.
Such a big deal. You were set for that day.
And were you dropping quarters into video games and wasting it that way?
Not
too?
Video games. I was a pinball guy. And in fact, it was when I was talking with Kelsey last night. Or was it? No. I'm sorry. There was a woman that came to the show in Lacey last night her and her husband own a bunch of pinball games and pinball machines. And she said, were you ever into pinball? And I was like, oh, yeah, that was my thing. And she's like, she gave me her card, and I guess they have them all set up at their house. But yeah, I was big on pinball, man. And when you could put in a dime and you could play pinball and... Yeah.
All right. So, do you remember your favorite pinball machine?
Oh man, I don't actually. I don't think I really. I didn't. I know that's one of those things. I didn't pay attention to details like that when I was a kid. I just wanted to play and keep from tilting it. I don't. I know I'm gonna get back in the van when I go to the show, and I'm gonna remember. But Steve, my brother, he would remember the games exactly. He's just got that kind of.
There was a Ted Nugent one with the guitar where the guitar was a gun.
I do remember that. I hated Ted Nugent even back then.
Oh, even back then.
Yeah, even I was a rock and roll kid, and I hated him, and not to get all political really quick, but. I just hated that he was just such a, because back in the 70s, he had the big beard.
Yeah,
and he was and I there were some songs I thought he was good at, but I knew all my friends loved Ted Nugent, and even Steve loved him, but I remember reading an interview with him in Cream magazine, and he just seemed like such a dick. I was like, even then I thought, you're just trying to be a wild man. You're trying to be the crazy guy. And that was, of course, the interview where he actually talked about getting out of the draft and what he did to get out of the draft. Mr. Patriot, and
Yeah.
But
and what was it he says he did to get out of the draft?
He said he spent a week eating just nothing but garbage, and then he shit his pants, and he didn't bathe for a week, and then he went into the draft board thing.
But he shit his pants when he went into the draft board.
Yeah, so that he would just be this smelly bum looking guy with shit in his beard and whatever. And then, of course, when I was a kid, I thought it was hilarious. But just later on, when you realize just the things he's said,
sure,
and you're just like, I don't know. I can't, I can separate that kind of stuff sometimes, but I just never liked the guy.
You had a sense of it. And I didn't know his music at all.
Yeah.
In fact, all I knew about Ted Nugent for a long time was that there was a pinball machine that had that guitar gun thing that was pretty damn cool.
When I had Free for All, I had some of his records, and he was somebody that I should have liked, because that whole era of hard rock music I loved. But there was something about him, man, that I even went to a Day on the Green festival in San Francisco when they used to have those in Oakland. And it was Cheap Trick and all these people.
How old were you?
Oh, I was probably 14 or something,
okay.
And he was, when he got on, I was I'm going to go walk over and go check. I just didn't even care. It was funny. I don't know why I didn't like him ever.
You just had a good sense.
Yeah.
So, talking about being 14 and going to the Day on the Green
Yep.
festival. You're a rock kid. You're aware of Ted Nugent that young.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna ask a couple questions regarding these age things here. But so, when did you start listening to music and knowing that you enjoyed music that was beyond little kid music? What's your first record?
Yeah. Well, so keep in mind that my father. I grew up. Everybody in my family is very musically inclined. My father loved Johnny Cash and Waylon Jennings. He loved the country stuff. and could play. He had a beautiful voice. He could play guitar. And I remember the one thing that I can remember bonding with him on is just is just sitting on the couch or even almost at his feet, and he'd play, and I'd just be like, this is great. I didn't even really like the music. I thought it was like corny old guy music, but I just loved it, and he had a great voice. My mom, on the other hand, was into Motown, the British invasion. Later on, in the late '60s, she was into Hendrix, and I remember she had the Easy Rider soundtrack, and she would play that, and I remember Hendrix kind of scared me because I just immediately equated it with drugs, but she was really into everything, and she was always playing 45s and singing around the house. And at an early age, I remember learning how to sort of harmonize with her, so we would do that. But when I just remember hearing Three Dog Night. They had a couple songs. There was like Joy to the World, and then there was like, they had a couple like Mama Told Me Not to Come. And it was kind of like, ooh, this is like weird. What are they talking about? Drugs at a party? Like, what does that mean?
Are you 6 or 7?
No, I was probably about 10, 11.
10. Okay,
yeah.
So that's kind of when you're like,
radio was always on, and you'd hear, I don't know, Elton John or whatever it was on the radio, but I was never a radio kid. I was actually early on. I learned the big difference between radio, AM radio and FM radio, and I knew that you could tune in late nights on some FM station, and there'd just be this guy going, all right, we're gonna play like the entire side of Black Sabbath or whatever. And that just appealed to me because it seemed very personal and intimate, and it seemed like they were just doing whatever they wanted to do. And later on, you found out they were. Like, freeform FM music was a big deal in the late 60s and 70s. So I got turned on to that really early on. And because of that, I'd also, I think, developed an appreciation for entire albums, not just hit singles, that kind of stuff. But I think my first time I ever wanted to go buy a record, and I just talked about this last night because the guy from Monoreels.
Peter?
Yes, Peter.
Oh, we went out with him last night.
Yes, yeah, good guy, great band, great songwriter. Holy crap! But he had a song about Grand Funk Railroad, which is really funny, and that was the first band. I think the first record I ever bought was Mark Don and Mel, Grand Funk Railroad, Mark Don and Mel, and that was when it was like hard rock, So then, at that point, I was like, okay, I really like loud guitar riff driving music, and so that's kind of what started it all. After that, it was Sabbath and Deep Purple and Blue Oyster Cult and all of that stuff, but yeah, and that, in the 70s, there were so many concerts, you could pay $4 and you'd go see, an all-day thing where it was like Rush, Foghat, Ted Nugent, Cheap Trick, it was insane. And it would just be 60,000.
And you had a mother that would take you to that stuff.
Yeah, or a friend that would just, we always had, my mom was always den mom of whatever neighborhood we lived in. So everybody always hung out at our house. It was always a big, open door, So between the moms of all my friends, everybody was sort of similar. So everybody would just kind of go to shows, but we were too young to go ourselves. So yeah, we'd have to be driven, But that stuff just was so phenomenal to me. Just the idea that many people would gather to go listen to this amplified music. If I really think about it, it was probably the worst sounding crap ever because it was at a stadium, and but just the people would be throwing frisbees at each other. Yeah, the whole thing. Like, people would be smoking pot out in the middle of this field, and you'd think, this is just insane. Like, even if it was stuff that I wasn't even into, I was just like, I never knew this existed. Like, how do they do this? How did they come up with this idea?
You talked about hearing Hendrix on the Easy Rider soundtrack. Yep. And you said it scared you because it made you think of drugs. Yeah, that song, If 6 Was 9, doo-doo, it was just so, probably because I knew a little bit about Easy Rider too. And well, so my question is, how old do you think at that time? It had to be 10, 11. Why were you afraid of drugs? Oh, just, because we lived in the worst neighborhoods we could possibly live in because it was cheap. And it was usually these apartment complexes. And at an early age, I understood, not just my own family, but families that we were living next door to and underneath. Everybody was poor and everybody was just sort of struggling. And
bikers and, dudes that would work on their cars at 3:00 in the morning. And, like I heard the word amphetamine way too early in life. I knew that was a thing. I also knew that, everyone I knew smoked pot, and it was just part of the culture and it's what you did. And if you didn't, you were just a square.
When you were that age, which is essentially junior high.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So let's separate this out just a little bit. You moved to Reno at 10?
No. I didn't. We didn't move to Reno until I was 16.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
so you did both grade school and junior high in Sacramento.
Sacramento, yeah.
With the same people, same school district, or were you moving around there too?
We moved around tons. In fact, I remember way back when LiveJournal was a thing, they would let you put in all your schools, and I just thought I never do that stuff, so I tried to do it, and I realized, I went to between kindergarten and 6th grade. I went to 7 schools.
Oh.
Yeah.
You were the new kid all the time.
Always, yeah. And there was even a time that I remember, it would really suck because I would have friends that, it would get to the point too where I would cut school to go hang out with my friends who were going to the other school, or they would do the same thing. Like that was a thing to do. But yeah, I went to a lot. We moved around a lot, and just enough to where we were just outside of that area, so you'd have to go to another school. And it was just a bummer. It was just a bummer. I think it's one of the reasons that I didn't take to, after about 4th grade, I went to first to 5th grade at the same school, Mariposa. And that was a great experience because I was, I'd had teachers that seemed like they cared. And then after that, it was just like, it seemed like I was going to school every few weeks, which it wasn't true, but it
right,
like,
but it was, and you were having to sit in with new classes of kids you didn't know, and they'd all worked out their pecking orders.
Right.
Where did you fit in all that?
I didn't.
Well, that's an interesting perspective. I'm trying to figure out a little bit about how one becomes Kevin Seconds.
Yeah.
And you're not Kevin Seconds yet.
No, I was very shy, painfully so, very introverted. I knew early on that I liked being around girls, and I had an attraction to girls, but I was terrified of them. I didn't know how to talk to them, and if I found out, if somebody would say that girl likes you, I would just go, I would actually run. Because I didn't know how to deal with. Granted, who does it?
You liked being around them, but you didn't want to have to talk.
I did, because I wasn't at an early age. I saw a lot of my friends were just already doing either the jock. And I say friends. I didn't have a lot of friends in grade school.
Yeah.
But I didn't fit into anything, and so just to avoid the awkwardness of like not wanting to go do, there were moments where I did go through phases throughout my young life where I liked sports and I tried out for it, but I think it was just really trying to fit in somehow, and I wasn't particularly good at any of that stuff. I could get on a team, but I was never like the star guy or ever, and
but you could do it. You weren't the slowest runner.
No, not the slowest, and I was too small for football, and that really bummed me out, and I was too slow for basketball, but I could play, I could shoot, and I could drill, but I was just never quite there, And the other alternative was like my friend. I learned early on that there were my friends who were just going to school and getting stoned behind the school, and then just laughing at each other and doing that. And I tried that, and I was like, well, this isn't my thing either. So I would just go sit in a library and read like a friggin' encyclopedia or something. And I wasn't a nerd. Maybe I was, but I just didn't really I wasn't comfortable, and as I got older and I was going through junior high and high school, I just wasn't. No one was engaging. Like there was no teachers that were inspiring me.
Wait, so this went into high school too, but that gets you into Reno.
Nope.
So no,
I went to Reno. I went to Roseville High School, which is a suburb above Sacramento, just north of Sacramento, and I quit in the 11th grade. I'd already started to really realize that I was drawing a lot. I was always drawing, and just on everything, and getting in trouble for just drawing on stuff that I wasn't supposed to draw. And I was already just getting into music, and I would sneak Circus and Cream magazines in my, school stuff, and just sit there and just read and look at photos of like, Jimmy Page playing guitar and just think, holy crap, man, this is who I am, not knowing anything about how to play music. And so then I would just try to go for anything. Like I was in choir in a couple of schools and did well at that. Always did well in like graphic arts and all the art stuff.
Sure.
But just that's about it. You know, everything else was like math was just doing. I was so horrible at it. I just couldn't, and I didn't want to learn it. You know, I didn't want to.
Yep. I understand that.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it was just like, of course, you know. Then I was like, God, why didn't I learn how to do that? But at the time, I was just like, I just don't. Who needs this crap, man? You know. So
the classic, I'm never going to use this,
which is ridiculous when you think about it.
Ridiculous.
You know, but you know, it is what it is, and so I. Just had lost interest in school, in high school, and then I started to kind of fall back and hang out with the stoners just to escape, you know, the reality of like, I'm stuck in this, like, until, you know, whatever time in the afternoon night we got out. And at that point I started to get a little better with talking to girls, and girls would show interest. And so I just, all of a sudden was like, there's a whole world out there that is like, has nothing to do with high school that I want to go towards.
And you're 16?
Yeah, about 16.
First girlfriend?
First.
You don't have to name anybody's name.
How do you mean that? No,
I'm interested to hear
my first girlfriend was Tina Turner, believe it or not. We lived in this apartment in Citrus Heights, California, just a 4-plex apartment thing, and we lived on the bottom floor. So there's 4, you know, 2 on the left, right, and then on top. We lived next door to the swimming pool, which was great because on Saturdays we would put the stereo speaker in the window, my bedroom window, and then you could blare out, you know. And I just remember, for whatever reason, and I still to this day think of it, I just think of school's out forever. Like, you could just hear that and everybody would be like, yes. But the upstairs were the Turners, and it was insane. They had a 2-bedroom apartment, and there was the mom and dad, and then 4 kids, and maybe 5 kids. And the oldest daughter was Tina. She was my age.
And just to specify for people who are listening right now, you're not talking about Tina Turner.
I dated Tina Turner, yes. Ike was very mad. No, of course. I'm not that old. Jesus.
I know, but listen, there may be a perspective issue for our younger listeners.
Right, I got you. Unfortunately, no, it was not. It was just a girl. The Tina Turner. It was a Tina Turner. And she was, you know, really cute. And I just thought she was so nice, and she would just listen to me just say nothing and just look at me as though I was just a genius. And I needed that in my young life. So, but yeah, we would make out a lot, and I had no idea of what you would do with an actual girlfriend, you know, but she became my girlfriend, which meant to all the other boys in the neighborhood, hands off, because that, you know, Tina's Kevin's girlfriend and Kevin's Tina's boy, you know.
Right.
And but we mostly did a lot of things, like we played a lot of spin the bottle, and she would get jealous if I kissed another girl, and I'd get jealous. It was just silly, sweet stuff. But yeah, she was sort of my first girlfriend, and then they moved away, and I was devastated. And
they moved away and you were devastated, but was that the thing that kind of opened up the being able to talk to girls?
I guess so. I think my sister Carrie was just she was always really able to talk to everybody, and everyone loved her because she was just funny and smart, and she still is amazing. And I think I learned a lot from her, to be honest. Even though she was younger, I think I just would watch her interact, and I think, well, if there's girls like that, because she could start a conversation. And I think, well, so if I can find a girl that will at least, you know, if I don't have to be the guy that comes up and says, hey, baby, what's going on? You know, because to this day, like, you know, in the few times I've been single and not had a girlfriend, or, you know, I've had, you know, a wife, of course, now, but I was never good at going up and saying, how's it going? You know, I never had a line.
What's your sign?
Never, anything. It would either have to be a woman who was just independent and like, hey, how are you? Like, she'd have to
kind of happen organically.
Always, yeah. Or it would have to be somebody that, you know, I was with forever, and we just, like, one night we're like, hey, I think we like each other, and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that was, I think Tina was just, it just sort of let me know that, you know, okay, well, I guess I like girls, so this is cool, you know, like, wherever this takes me, I'll go.
Nice. And this is all still Sacramento. This is all before you leave.
Yes. Yeah.
And punk rock doesn't even come onto your radar in high school? Like, you're out of high school before that even is
I
part of the game.
Quit my 3rd year, and it was kind of a thing because my mom was in the school system as an educator, but she was very cool. My mom was always like, have you thought about this? You know, and do you realize, you know, that this could be? And I was like, yeah. And she said, well, at some point, you know, I want you to, it's funny because I don't even know if GD was the thing that they called it then, but she said, I want you to get your, you know, I think you should, you know, think about going back or whatever. And I said, yeah, whatever, you know. But and then later on, I did get my GED, but it was like, even then, I'm just really still doing this just so that I can say to my mom, by the way, Mom, I did get that,
Right.
Because at that point, But yeah, there was no, I got the bug in about 10th grade that I wanted to play music in a band. And I didn't really know what that meant because we're talking... the mid 70s, and there were it wasn't like you could go to a club and see an all ages show. That didn't exist.
Right.
It was either you went to a battle of the bands that was at a parking lot in the shopping center, and you'd see these bands, which I did. There was a battle of the bands one summer day in Roseville, California, and this band called Black Diamond that were doing Kiss songs. And I could tell they were my age, and they were just killing it. And this one kid had a black Gibson Les Paul. And I'm like, he's like 14, 15, and he's like got a Les Paul, and, So I was just that just blew my mind, and I couldn't believe it. I just was like, kids are doing this. Okay, I can do this. So I remember I had a buddy across the street, Corey Faught, Fautt, and I said, you should play drums. I'll play guitar. And so he was like, all right, I'll do that. So I think he did get drums, and we just tried to do something. And I didn't even really know how to fully form chords or anything. I was kind of doing this thing where I put my finger across it and just go, rah, rah, rah,
Yeah.
It just sounded terrible. But yeah, the minute that bug set in, that was it. I was like, because for years growing up, I didn't have any huge highfalutin goals other than I wanted to be an FM disc jockey. I had really this crazy obsession about being in radio, to the point where I would beg my mom to take me to radio stations, and she would go and ask if they would give a tour to her son, and they would show us around. And to me, it was just amazing, just seeing this kind of equipment. And,
wow.
Oh, it was crazy. I just thought it was the coolest thing in the world. And then early on, I wanted to be, because my uncle Ron was he was a jockey, an actual. That's funny. I wanted to be a jockey and a disc jockey.
So
he was a jockey. He racehorses. My grandfather, my mom's father, trained racehorses, and he was a jockey. And I remember just thinking, he was a real cool dude, just a great guy and funny. And I remember saying to him, I want to be a jockey like you. And he told me, Kevy, I think you're going to be too tall to be a jockey. And I was heartbroken. I was like, because he was a tiny man, and you had to be little. And I was like, you're kidding me. You mean I can't be like, and he's like, no, I think you're going to probably be about 6 feet, and you can't be a jockey. And I was like, no.
Oh no, crushed.
Yeah. So I found out you didn't have to be, you didn't have to be short to be a disc jockey. So that was the next thing. But other than that, it went right to music. I was like, I wanted to do music, and I just was, I think the research I did was pretty much Cream Magazine was the thing.
So the one more question that I have about young Kevin, especially with the moving around the different schools and having to deal with all these different kids in the pecking order. Fights?
Yes, but only because I was just, I must have had the face that just said pick on me.
So you weren't a fight starter?
Not a starter.
Did you end many of them?
Yes, and here's my thing, and I think I've mentioned this before in interviews, but so in junior high, in 7th grade, we lived in a town called Folsom, which is another suburb. At the time, where Folsom Person is, it was very, very redneck, very conservative. All the kids had very short hair, crew cuts. My mom let me grow my hair out long, and I was also obsessed with the TV show Kung Fu with David Carradine. And his character, Kwai Chang Caine, he's a Buddhist, it was, when you think about that was an actual TV show, kind of blows my mind, because it was way high-minded, of course, it always came down to him kicking, 3 cowboys' asses or whatever, but it was just, I loved his character, how he would just walk through very peaceful, he wouldn't say anything, sometimes he'd play the flute, and then he'd try to back out of a fight, and then finally he just, okay, you want it, it's on, I'm going to kill you. So I would walk around, and this is probably why I got picked on. I would walk around. I actually begged my mom to get me a brown corduroy coat that I thought looked like his. I'm not kidding. This is sad.
No, it's not sad at all.
And I developed the way to speak. So I would, instead of going, hey man, what's going on? I'd be like, how are you today? Like I'd try to be very calm. And it's funny because I now see why kids really were just like, what is up with this motherfucker? Like, who does he think he is? But the downside is that I didn't know kung fu. So when it came down to like fighting back, I was screwed, So
you knew TV kung fu.
I knew TV kung fu, and I would just and that actually did help me because I would think, what would Kane do? Would he'd go back and how he would go back and did you ever see this show?
Yeah.
He'd go back and think about when he was at the monastery and what
snatch the pebble.
Yeah.
Did you make someone hold a pebble?
No, I would have though if I could. If I could. I would have asked somebody to. Can I refer to you as master or something or other?
Okay, we're gonna pin this right here. We're coming right back to it.
Okay.
Where did any of this end up in your lyrical content later on in your life?
Wow, what an interesting question. Well, I think I just always, as angry, as much anger as I've had in myself, I think I've always sort of wanted to be Kane. Like I always wanted to get back to my inner Kwai Chang Kane, Like I really, truly, like I always, even when I am just being a complete dickhead, and I know I'm being a dickhead, I think there's always this thing where I'm just like, okay, work with this through your head. Think about what you're doing and think about all of, the cause and effect and all that stuff, and just try to realize that, this is unnecessary.
So you have no lifted lyrics from dialogue or the plotting of the show. Okay. No. I'm surprised. I would think that something would have seeped in somewhere.
In fact, it was like a secret I carried for a long time because I just thought it was so corny. And I was also sort of admitting to being like a child, kids of the 70s. I mean, TV was a big deal.
Yeah.
So I was sort of also admitting that like, I watched a lot of TV when I was a kid. But it just was, I don't know. I mean, it's funny that show, and I've talked to people my age, since then, and people are like, that show had the same effect on me, which now I'm like, well, that's cool. It's good to know, All
right, so we're taking the pin back out. You're that age. You're walking around. You were telling a specific story about a specific fight?
Well, so there was a kid that would always pick on me in the PE class or whatever, and I had long hair, and his name was, I'm not even kidding, his name was Kit Karstens.
Okay.
Yeah, and he was just this, like, white, trashy, dickhead, and he was a bully. And he would do things, he would purposely place himself behind me if we'd have to stand in line for, like, calisthenics or whatever. He would do this thing where he had a way to do this thing with a rubber band around his fingers, and then he would let it go in my hair, and it would like just catch in my hair. And he would do it, and I would just sit there and spend the rest of the day trying to do it, and I just wouldn't fight back. And I remember a couple people saying, "You got to fight back," Oh, he called me out. That was a big thing. When you got called out after school, back behind the shed, that's where we were meeting, and that it wasn't even the fighting. It just terrified me to be. Because it would always be two guys or two girls, and then just a crowd of people.
A crowd of people
and
around.
The crowd terrified me. The idea that these people would sit and witness me being slaughtered, or and so I was just, I was just a very passive, scared kid, fearful, very fearful. And I think it's just because the way we grew up, there was just always violence around. There was always like stuff going on that just, as a kid, I couldn't understand. I knew it was very adult and very serious, and I just didn't know how to process it, so I tried to ignore it, but you couldn't. So I think by the time I was, in junior high school, I just was like, I don't want any part of this, Anyways, he just kept at me. And finally, a guy said, a friend of mine said, you got to fight back, man. You can't.
So you didn't go behind the...
No.
Okay.
No. I would just hide out in the library or whatever. Right. And then I finally just one day he did that, and I turned around and I said, "Don't do that again. Don't ever do that again." And he just looked at me. So then a couple of days went by, and he didn't say anything. I was like, wow, that kind of worked, And so, of course...
A stern confrontation.
Yeah, like, oh, that's all it took is for me to turn around and have this look in my eye like, motherfucker, come at me, bro, So that it kind of maybe been a week, and then, like, he did it again, and he called me out, and I said, I accept. I will meet you.
Oh.
And I was just like, what am I doing? And so the whole day, there's a movie out called 3 O'Clock High?
3 O'Clock High.
You know what I'm talking about?
It's awesome.
Right. One of the greatest things.
Wait, so you were then trying to hire someone to go beat him up for you?
No. Okay. But when that movie came out, I was just like, the fear that the kid has where he's looking at the clock, and he knows that this crazy, and my guy wasn't even that big, he was just a scrawny kid. But he had enough confidence and he had enough backup. He always had backup. He always had these guys that followed him around.
Yeah.
So
toadies, they call those.
Is that what it was?
I think so.
I don't even remember. Just he had it. They actually called themselves the Kit Carson's gang. They had a name for it. And so for me, it was just like it was just a big, it was just a big. I visualized what went down in prisons, and I'm just like, I'm not ready for this, But I was just so angry, and I already wanted out of school. I was just like, maybe they'll kick me out of school if I go and fight this kid. So I go there, and everybody's waiting, and I had one friend, sort of, who just was there, and, we only liked each other because we both loved Deep Purple, the band Deep Purple. Right. But I go there, and, it's like, okay, it's on. And I'm just like, no one had ever taught me how to put on my fists or doing that kind of stuff. So I just sort of, probably thinking about some movies or something I'd seen on TV, I just kind of put my fist up to block my face. And he went to punch me and he missed. And I just punched him right in the face. And then it was on. I was so excited because I saw him stammer. And I wanted to kill him. I think I was trying to kill him. And my thing, the few fights I'd been in as a kid, I always had to cuss while I was doing it. And you motherfucking cocksucker dick. Blah, blah. I had to yell. I remember one time I got in a fight and I actually went to my, I was 7. It's like a Christmas story. And I asked my dad, oh, is it?
When the kid snaps, he's like cursing.
Oh, I don't remember. I didn't know that. That's funny. No, I remember asking my dad years back when I was got in a fight with a neighbor kid. Dad, is it okay if I cuss? That guy's, and he's like, if you got to do that, I guess you got to do it. But yeah, I was just motherfucker, and I was just trying to pulverize this kid. And finally, a teacher came out there and grabbed me, and enough. And then the kid was crying, and I just was so happy that I made him cry. I was like, finally, I win at something. Finally, I'm like the guy that I didn't even know if I cared whether the other kids thought of anything. I was just like, he'll know that I'd had enough, And so that was it. And after that, it was just like in the movies. There was a newfound respect. Girls were sort of going, hi, Kevin. It was
my
just
God. It's such a terrible lesson that it's real, that it really works that way. And I don't know if dads still teach their kids how to fight other kids or tell them, if you got to. I mean, I didn't get in fights, but I got great advice from my dad about what to do if I did.
I wish I had.
Number 1, I don't want you to fight. Number 2, if you do get in a fight, A, B, and C. And that's, I don't know if the kids get that kind of lesson anymore. I don't think. And maybe it's good. Yeah. I still think there's going to be some kind of repercussions.
Of course, yeah. And what little I did know, it was just from friends of mine who I knew were badasses who carried knives and who would pick up a rock and stuff. So that was honestly in the back of my mind. If I start to lose, I'm going to pick up a rock and hit him in the head with it. I was thinking like that.
Well, total commitment.
Yeah, no, just because I thought he was that crazy that he wanted me dead. In my mind, he was constantly at me, and he obviously had a beef with me. So I was like, he just really wants me out of the picture. So I have to think like that, I guess. But luckily, just getting the first edge and then just not letting him up, sort of like MMA fighting, where it's just like, once you're down, I'm not going to stop. So that was the deal.
Were you kicked out of school?
No, I did get in trouble, and they called my mom, and my mom, I knew already that my mom was going to come in there and go, when I get you home, but I knew that then she'd look at me and say, I'm glad you stuck up, because she knew I was going. One of the things that I did was one of the big beefs with the kids in my school was that I had hair a little past my shoulders, and she was really big on letting me do what I felt was right and stuff, and she probably should have just said, honey, you should just cut your hair so you don't get picked on all the time. But she was trying to be a cool mom is what she was trying to do, and give me my freedom, which now I appreciate that. But yeah, so she came down and got me and asked me about it, and I just said, I cussed, and I da-da-da-da. So I don't remember, I don't think I got expelled or anything. I think I just got reprimanded or anything. But like I said, at that point, I was just so done with it.
The other question I have is, what happened then when you saw him later? Did he still stand behind you when you were doing? No, he stayed away. He avoided me, and there was even kids. There was a girl that was his sister's friend who there was a rumor that she liked me. She told a friend, and I think it was even maybe more of an insult to him that like his sister's friend would like me or something. But he stayed away from me. And then 8th grade, he tried to be friends with me. He actually tried to be nice to me. Oh, the cycle completes basically
just
at that point.
Like maybe like now I think was he going to come up and say, I respect you, kid. But
that's kind of how it works, though.
No, it is kind of how. Is that what you're saying?
I mean, I had one of my very, very close friends picked on me relentlessly through grade school.
Yeah.
And in junior high became one of my very closest friends. And he straight up told me, he was like, "Oh no, we're friends now." I'm like,
funny.
Oh man, what? No, that's not going to happen. And he was like, and I thought, but the thing is, I thought it was an elaborate ruse to just find another way to pummel me, But then he ended up being a very, very close, important friend of mine to this day.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's, I for some people, they don't know how to act. I guess it's like in a weird way, it's like a boy pulling a girl's hair that he likes, maybe there's you don't know how to become friends with that person, so maybe
I think you're right about that. That's a really good point.
We fight first and then we can become friends because we've already tested the waters with each other.
Yeah, and I've had that happen in the punk hardcore scene where someone who just hated me and used to talk and like was an enemy, in his mind. Later on, would approach me and say, I was, I don't know if you remember, but I was like Sig Heiling you in St. Louis or whatever, and I totally grew up and I got out of that shit. But I've become friends with some of those dudes now, and I didn't pursue it. I was, it's like, and a lot of it I don't remember, but it's just like, that does happen where it's like, I don't know why I was like, you're a really cool guy. I don't know why I hated you so much.
Oh, it's difficult. Okay, so I basically got all the different points I look for in that. I think I got it figured out a little bit. Let's get you to Reno. You've dropped out of school and now you're in Reno?
Yes. Yeah, I dropped out of school and I did have an idea. Well, so my thing is that I knew we were going to struggle when we went up to Reno, even though my mom was like, no, there's jobs waiting for us. And we were going to live with a family, one of her best friends and her son and daughter. They had a house and we were going to live with them for a little while until we could get on our feet. And, I guess I was just, okay. So when I don't want to skip this part because this is sort of a musical thing. So at 15, I finally got the courage to try out for a band as a singer. And there used to be a newspaper in Sacramento called Rock and Roll News. It was just a local paper, and it usually would have like Aerosmith on the cover, but they covered the local club scene, which I didn't relate to because I was a kid. But then on the back they had a classified section, and they would have help. We need, we're a band. We're looking for a singer. I'm a guitar player. I'm looking for a band. So I answered an ad that was looking for a singer who liked, Black Sabbath, Deep Purple, and just thinking like, well, I can mimic all that stuff. It's stuff I grew up with. So I tried out, and I lied to them and said I was 18. These guys were all 18 and 19. I lied and said I was 18. They said, well, can you do like rock and roll from Led Zeppelin, And I did it, but I thought in my mind I was doing Robert Plant's sort of falsetto. I mean, I wasn't actually going, been a long time. I was like, been a long time. I was singing like girly voice. And they liked it, so they actually hired me, whatever that meant. And we rehearsed a lot. It was all covers. And the guy I didn't even have a car. The guitar player would pick me up, and we'd go like 20 miles to our practice space, and then he'd have to take me back. And we did a couple. Did they
figure out how old you were?
No, I don't think so. It's pretty funny. So we did a couple gigs, party gigs. And I remember I was a poor kid, so I asked my mom to take me to a thrift store, and I bought like these. This is so embarrassing. Steve Youth just brought this up maybe 3 weeks ago. He goes, "You remember when you went to the store and you bought these purple bell bottom, like they were like crushed velvet? In my mind, that was like rock and roll pants. And then I had these like sort of weird boots that had a little bit of a heel. I just wanted to look like I was taller, and it was so ghetto and terrible." But I did the show and it was fine or whatever. And then that's when my mom said, I just think we can't make it down here. We need to move. So we moved to Reno. But I carried the idea that I want to be in a band with me up there. So the minute we got...
What was the name of that band?
Bastille, but
Bastille,
Basteel, and dude, and the guitar player John Oster, who was an amazing guitar player. He loved Ritchie Blackmore, and like he copied him. Looked like he was like a slightly chubbier guy, but he wear all black, and he had a funny hat like Ritchie Blackmore. He was an amazing guitar player. Later on in the 90s, he was in a black metal band in Sacramento called, and it was a name they shared with like 3 other bands, not Obituary, but that kind of name. Enthroned.
Okay.
Enthroned. And I think there's one from like Sweden, and they were the Sacramento Enthroned, and they were heavy. And I ran into him at there was a big practice space, and we had a room across from it. And I was always thinking, oh, if I ever see John, I wonder if I'll recognize him. Well, I saw him and he looked totally different. I said, hey, John, my name's Kevin. I don't know if you remember this, but back and da-da-da. And he just looked at me like, oh, okay. Like he didn't register, like, or he was too cool because now he's like a black metal guy, you know.
Oh, that's too bad.
But it didn't matter. I didn't even care, you know. I was almost just as embarrassed about it as he could have ever been. But yeah, that was my entry into being a musician.
Okay, but we're still not at punk rock.
No,
there's a what gets you to punk rock?
So we moved to Reno, 77. We're living in a motel called the Western Motel that's no longer there. And there's a special on one of the big networks. NBC had a thing, Weekend, I think it was the show. And they were like, there's a crazy thing going on in England right now. The kids they're choking each other, and it's violent, and it's negative, and it's this and that. And, you know, they worship Hitler, and it was just everything they could say. And I was working at McDonald's, and I just was sort of like still loving all the rock and roll records I was buying, but I was just missing. Oh, also too, disco was becoming a big deal. And I was finding out that anybody that was my age, if you wanted to try and go hang out and get laid and party, you know, the best way to do it is just go to a discotheque. You meet girls, you can drink if you want. Underage people were drinking. I just had no interest in that. Like, I had interest in the girl part a little bit, but I just didn't want to have to go through that. I tried it, I think, once, and it was horrible. So I just had nothing to and I wasn't really going to school. I was just working, and I was just trying to become like a young adult, I guess. And I saw the special, and I just remember looking at Steve, who at the time was freaking 12 or something, you know. And we were looking at it like, what the hell is this? And it's the Sex Pistols playing live, like Anarchy, and just we'd never even come close to hearing anything like that. That just seemed like from outer space. And the kids were, you know, they were pogoing, choking each other, and just crazy, and safety pins. And I'm like, this is so fucking stupid, but I don't know why I'm turned on by this. Like, this seems, it's almost like it's saying, here's the world that you need to be a part of. And I to this day, and I've taught, you know, I've heard everybody that does a book, whether it's Bob Mould, everybody has the same response, the same reaction. So, yeah, so then I'm like, I have to understand this. How do we do this? Like, because keep in mind, we're talking, you know, way pre-internet. Rolling Stone would kind of cover some stuff. Cream did a little more, like Iggy and New York Dolls and stuff. But I knew about those bands, but I honestly didn't kind of appreciate them until after I got into this, like the Ramones and the Pistols and stuff. But that just set it off. And so I just went, I remember going to the Reno Library, and just looking up punk rock. Nothing.
Yeah. And there aren't books on this?
You're right. You know, like, is there a could this be in an encyclopedia somehow? You know,
you're looking through the card catalog in the P section.
I was.
Right.
I'm telling you. Well, then
in the Dewey Decimal System, where is this punk rock? Didn't
exist. So then the next best thing was they had a stack of Billboard magazines, and I would take them all and sit for hours at this table and just combing through, and I'd be like, Foghat, ZZ Top. I don't care about that. I know about all that. And every once in a while there'd be a blip, you know, of something. And so I was on a mission to try to understand what it was. Like, I didn't understand the musical thing, the lyrical, the political nothing. I just knew that it meant it was youthful, and there was rage, and there was like the crowd. You know, I got groomed to understand and appreciate being in a stadium with several thousand other people, you know, 100 yards, you know, way far away from the band. They didn't know we existed. You couldn't go up and say, hey, great set. And none of that. It was just, now, don't get me wrong, it was exciting, but I was sort of getting sick of it. So and then I started seeing, I think I saw some footage of the Ramones at CBGB's, and the crowd was like, you know, a foot away from them. I'm like, well, this is cool, you know. So, yeah, so I started just trying to find out what was going on, and the thing that I remember going to, there was a record store called Eucalyptus Records. It was a small chain, and they had the first Ramones album, and I just said, I'm buying it. And the guy actually said, "You're really gonna buy this?" And I was like, yeah. And he's like, whatever. And I think it was $7.99 for whatever reason. Took it home, put it on, and that was it. It was over. Just hearing "Beat on the Brat" and, "Hey Daddy-O, I don't want to go." I had no idea what he was talking about, but that 1, 2, 3, 4, it killed me. Like I was floored. I didn't want to talk to anybody. I didn't want to know anybody. I was just like, I think even then I just wanted to go and throw away every record I'd ever collected and I just want this one album, The good thing was that my little brother, Steve, loved it as much as I did. And so we had a thing like where we were always very close, but all of a sudden we had discovered something together. And I knew he knew that I was thinking of shit. What can we do with this? Like we've discovered this band, and this band called the Sex Pistols, which it took us another couple months before we could even, I had to mail order to get a single. You couldn't find, because Sex Pistols were banned and they were like way more controversial than Ramones.
Sure.
And so there was I don't remember, it might have been Cream. There was a little teeny ad in the back of Cream of a guy named Charles Ackers. I'll always remember that, in New York. And if you sent a self-addressed empty envelope, he would send you a catalog of stuff that he had. It was all bootlegs, but it was not like rock and roll. It was like live Sex Pistols at the 100 Club and the Ramones at, Hurrahs or whatever the hell it was. And so you could, and it was like $5 a tape. So I just started ordering tapes, and I was
awesome.
Getting Sex Pistols and leads and and all of a sudden, horrible quality, the worst quality you can imagine. But you could hear everything. You could hear the crowd and people spilling shit, and Sid Sid falling down on the stage or whatever. And it was just, everything was just amazing about that. I don't know why. Like, I think about this to this day, and I go, why did that appeal to me? Like, who was I that appealed to me? And so. But
we all,
right?
all of us have this thing.
Yeah.
And it's.
What's wrong with us?
Mine doesn't happen for a few years later. Although it's funny that you brought up the Sex Pistols in the 70s, because I got a boombox for Christmas one year that could actually, the radio was like good enough that it could get stations from Seattle. And it was the first time I had a radio that could get stations that played other music than Bellingham, at a very like light pop station or whatever. Yeah. And after midnight one night, the DJ was playing Strange Things from Around the World, essentially. And he played EMI from the Sex Pistols. I believe that's the song. But I remember being a little kid, and what did he say the name of this?
Yeah.
Kind of like, oh, what is this? Is this something I'm not supposed to hear?
Oh yeah.
So I listened harder, and years later, when someone was like, oh, the Sex Pistols, I was like, oh no, I have heard them before.
Yeah.
I heard them when back in 80, maybe it was 1980, whenever it would have been something they could have had to play on the radio. But there was a little spark, a little, this is different, this is for you kind of thing, you know? And so I don't know what we were just, maybe it's kind of like how, like when people make great scientific discoveries, there's always other people all around the world who were making the exact same discovery at the same time, but they don't make the history books because they were late to the patent office or whatever. Maybe there are just times when the world says it's time for this, and you are the receptors. You get it.
Yeah, I think it's true. I think that's what it is, because too many people did it. Too many people got that, and
I'm attaching way too much importance to it, but it's very important to me.
It changed everything in me. Everything. It changed everything. I started looking at things so differently. I mean, I really did feel, much later but I really did feel like something or somebody invited me into this thing, this kind of exclusive thing, but now I'm turned loose and I have to figure out what I'm going to do within it. Like now it's because I can't just be a follower.
Right. This demands participation.
You have to engage and participate, and you can't just be a little, I mean, of course there are plenty of followers, but I didn't want to be. I wanted to, and I didn't want to be, I didn't even want to be a personality, a leader or anything. I just wanted to be right in the forefront of it. Because also too, I'd already gone through just getting the shit kicked out of me and just like not just being a weirdo and being somebody that, you know, didn't get respect or anything. So I was already in the like, okay, fine, I'll keep doing that as long as it's surrounded by great fucking music and people getting their aggression out and, you know, whatever. I'm cool with that. And it's funny you brought the Sex Pistols, like Nevermind the Bollocks. You know, when we first got that, now I think it was some kind of ploy marketing thing, but the record store that I just mentioned, they got a bunch of copies of it, but they wouldn't sell it. They displayed them, and then they put a thing saying we are not allowed to sell this record, which is brilliant.
Oh yeah.
Now you know it was a marketing thing. It had to be, because what's the point of putting the fucking record out? We would go in there every day, and I would please just sell me one copy, like, you know, because at this point I'd already heard some of the songs, live versions, and I started to hear more about the record, and I heard it was just this brilliantly done record, which it is. To this day, I still think it's an amazing record. But
it really is.
But when I got it, they finally turned it loose, and then we got it. So we get the record, and we go into my sister's room because she's got a working turntable, and we shut the door and we're playing it. And at first we're laughing because it was just cussing. We'd never heard, what bands were saying fuck this, fuck it all, you know.
Yeah.
And then Bodies comes on, which is still one of the darkest songs ever written, you know, and it's just about abortion, and that's when my mom comes in and says, "What are you listening to?" And we're like, this is the Sex Pistols. And she's like, what the hell is that? And we're like, remember we were watching that show and there was a kid, and she's like, oh my God, what is it? You know, so.
Wait, so she hears that song? That's an upsetting song.
Yeah. My mom, but you know, my mom she's a pretty funny, crazy person. And you know, she's got a sense of humor. She just didn't, you know, she didn't understand that there's this aggressive music. Her 3 kids are just going, listen to this, and repeating it. We kept putting it back on, and the fucks, and you know, and it just was like it just opened everything up. Like it was all of the things that you would have probably wanted to do on your own anyway. Just was all of a sudden it was like, okay, here's my license to do that. Johnny Rotten is like letting me do this, you know, or whatever. So yeah, that was it, and we just at that point on, it was just all about trying to get more and more and more. And it was very hard, like you said, bailing it. Like Reno was the same way. You couldn't just go anywhere. I mean, you'd be lucky if it was major label stuff, you could find it sometimes. But even getting the first Clash record, it took me forever. I had to get the import version, and I had to order it, and it cost me, you know, $50 or something back then. I mean, it was insane because you had to wait for it to get over. But
it's huge. That's a lot of money.
Yeah, and I'm probably I'm over exaggerating, but it was like you had to order it from some company out of New York, and it would take, you know, a month to get it. And the cool thing is that every once in a while there's a Recycled Records, and they would just get 7 inches, and I remember getting X-Ray Specs and Chelsea and just earlier, you know, 7-inch stuff. Eater, you know, like young kids they did a version of Alice Cooper's 18, but I'm 15, I don't know what I want, whatever. They were young guys, but all of this British stuff that I just thought was great, and that was it. I mean, I at that point I was like, you know, I still love all my old rock and roll records, but I can't relate. I remember going to see the Led Zeppelin movie, the documentary, and that was kind of for me, that was like the end of my Led Zeppelin love, because it was just overblown and just overindulgent rock star fantasy bullshit that had nothing to do with some kid living in some suburb, you know, like and you know, like even if they were great live, you couldn't go again. There was no connection at all to like, for all you know, when they looked out, they just saw nothing, you know, just a sea of shit. So I just got tired of that, and I got tired of being a part of that process. And so I love the fact that there was at least a hint of connectedness and community, and you know, you could relate to who you're looking at and who's looking back at you. And I just
wait. So how long after you started getting these records did you start finding other people that listened to these records and were part of a scene?
There weren't any. Really, so we're talking. We'll say, so we're getting into like 1978, and the Ramones came and played. Okay, I take it back. So Rocky Horror Picture Show was playing every Friday night down at the theater in Reno. We would go there occasionally, and we would just see these people that would have like safety pins or buttons, and we would just go, oh, cool, maybe they're, you know, but we wouldn't ever get the courage to talk to them.
Right.
Well, when we finally did, we realized that they too had heard about the Ramones, Sex Pistols and that kind of stuff, but there wasn't any real easy way to stay in touch. I was just like, well, here's my phone number. I don't have a phone. Okay, well, so maybe we'll see you next week at Rocky Horror. So it was that kind of thing. But yeah, the Ramones came through. Eddie Money came through and played the arena, and he had the Ramones opening for him. I don't know
amazing
why. I guess he did like 5 shows, and I just couldn't believe it. And the ticket was $6, and I just remember going, I can't believe I didn't even believe it until we were there that the Ramones were actually going to play.
Right.
I just thought this is bullshit. Got a ticket. We went to the thing, stood in line, and the funny thing was that I fought to get to the front of the line, like to be one of the first for whatever reasons, just because I was like, I just want to get to the front. I'm just going to be right in front of Joey, and I'm just going to fucking sing every lyric. And everybody that was the first 20 people were all people that were there for the Ramones. And I was like, where are you from? And it was like kids from Carson City, Nevada, kids from Lake Tahoe, kids from Susanville, all these places outside Reno, and a couple of Reno kids. And we were like, how did you find out about the Ramones? Like, what's your name? And that later on turned out to be the original foundation of the Sacramento or the Reno punk rock music scene.
Awesome.
And people from different bands that started. So we all ran. When they opened the gate, we ran to the front. We all got our spots. It seemed like we waited forever. Everybody we're looking at each other like, this is fucking happening. Like we saw I remember seeing the Gabba Gabba Hey sign. The roadie was behind moving it. I'm like, they're actually here, and I recognized Johnny's amp from photos, and I'm like, they're actually they're here. So it's going to happen. And they came out, and it was like fucking, oh my, I mean, seriously, it just was it was like being punched just a billion times and just loving every punch that you took. It was so incredible. Just loud, the loudest thing I'd ever heard. This is a really bizarre story, and sometimes I'm embarrassed to even talk about it. So early on, there was this girl, kind of a cute, like maybe a little stoner girl, I don't even know, standing behind me, and she's trying to make conversation before the Ramones started, and she's like, Eddie Money, and I was like, I don't give a fuck about Eddie Money, I'm here for Ramones. She's like, are you kidding? 2 tickets? She wanted to have this conversation. I'm like, I don't care. I could give a shit about Eddie Money. So then she's being a little flirtatious, and during the Ramones set, they start playing, and I'm just like, fuck yes, and I'm looking up at Joey. She starts to get touchy-feely with me, like she's feeling me up. I'm not even kidding. I also had snuck an old-time Polaroid camera, because this was back before any cool cameras. This big-ass thing that I'd stuffed down my pants and baggy pants just so I can take shots of the Ramones, which I still have. They're horrible. They're just and I took that out, and she actually put her hands down my pants, and she's like playing around, and I'm like, now this says a lot about, because I'm, back then, and I was into girls, and I was fully becoming of that, getting into that, but I was so like, I don't give a shit what she can do, anything she wants. But the only thing I could think of was like, what if Joey can see that, because I'm right in the front, I'm like, I hope Joey can't see that this girl's like basically jerking me off, So she's doing this the whole time. And then I realized she wants where I'm at when Eddie Money comes on. She thinks she has to do all this stuff.
Oh, no.
That's the only thing I could, because I'm like, I mean, granted, this is the late 70s. Everybody was a little crazier then. But I was just like, don't interrupt this moment. I like, whatever. And it's funny because after that, she gave me her number. And I remember I tried to call her like later. And she was
wait, so she did give you?
She gave me her number. And the minute the Ramones were done, I was like, okay, see you later. You can have my spot. I don't give a shit. I took off, but she gave me her number, and I remember trying to call her once, and she said, "Who are you again?" Like, she had no idea. I was like, the guy that you were having almost sex with in the front of the Ramones.
Wow.
Yeah, it was crazy. But Steve, my brother, got he was standing so that when they walked by Dee Dee, he goes, Dee Dee, and Dee Dee shook his hand and put a Ramones pick in his hand. He still has that in his wallet.
Oh, wow. That's super. He's been carrying it around ever since.
All faded, and you can't even tell, but he had it taped in the inside of his wallet. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. That was huge for Steve, because he was a huge Dee Dee Ramones fan.
Cool. Wow. I feel like we could talk about that story for a while. And it's funny, because when we were talking last night, we were talking about when you remember things, and because Jake said this in his episode, Jake from Minus the Bear, when you remember things, you remember your memory of the thing.
Yeah.
So you're sure that happened?
Yeah, it did. It definitely did. I mean, I don't know if it was. Here's where I don't know. I don't know if I was instigating it. I don't remember, like, you know, part of me was like, I've told everybody this, like, that I know. I'm like, it's just so funny to think about that. Like I must have given her the indication that I was into it. I mean, maybe, you know, but like, can you imagine that happening now? Like,
oh, I don't know.
I mean, I don't know where it would happen, but it's just like, to me, it's just like, it's a little bit like, oh, those freewheeling 70s, you know, everybody was a little nutty, but I have no idea. It just was I mean, things like that would actually happen. I remember I was working at this store called Gemco, which I think later on became Target. I don't remember, but I know that Gemco became a Target later, but I just had this horrific job, and I worked in the toy/garden department. So I was and I just hated the job, and the only thing that saved me, I just had no money ever. I had to take the bus. It was way out south of Reno. I had to go, you know, every day. And the only thing that would save me is listening to Give 'Em Enough Rope, the Clash album. That was the only thing that would just get me going. And I'd have those songs like Safe European Home, these songs in my head all during my shift. And I had this boss, Glenn. He was a dick. And he's the only boss that I ever almost got in a fist fight with.
Oh, wow.
Just to the point where I'm like, fuck you, you're disrespecting me. You don't have to treat me like shit. You ask me to do stuff, I do it, everything.
Yeah.
Don't act like a dick to me. And I did. That's actually what I told him. And he was just like, you know, if you don't like it, and I was like, I don't like it, and I'm quitting. Fuck you. The day I quit, I didn't even want to wait for the bus, and so I was actually going to hitchhike, which is really funny to think about because it just was something I didn't do a lot. But I stick my thumb out, and all of a sudden this Camaro pulls up, two hot girls. Hey, you need a ride? And I was like, yeah, hell yes, I need a ride.
On your way back from your
so,
job you just quit.
Yeah, I was just like, so I got in, the passenger gets in, I get in the middle, I'm between these two really hot girls, and the one girl in the passenger said, what are you doing? I was like, oh, I just got fired from my job, or I just quit my job. And she's like, really? Oh, man, what are you doing tonight? And I was like, nothing, I'm just... and then so they take me home, but I was embarrassed to have them take me to where I live because I live in this shitty apartments up in the sort of what was then sort of the ghetto of Reno.
Right.
So I had them drop me off at the 7-Eleven at the corner just so that they, you know. But right when I got out, the girl, and this is hilarious. I'm not going to say her name because she's actually a Facebook friend. She goes, well, here's my number. Call me sometime if you want to go party or whatever you'd say back then. And I was like. And she was beautiful. I mean, she's still beautiful. She's like 50 years old, and but I was just like, oh my God, I have a girl's number, you know. But stuff like that would just happen. Like people were a little more like, well, whatever happens, you know. Like I just think it was before we all got hung up on
the
all
two
that crazy
stories
shit.
that you just told me though happened at very important times in your life.
Yeah.
It happened at your first seeing of the Ramones where you didn't even believe it could possibly happen and your mind was blown. And then this thing happens. And then the take this job and shove it moment, which is can be a very freeing, empowering change in a person's life when they go, wait a minute, you mean I can just give you the finger and walk?
Yeah, but see, the thing is, I'd done it already a lot.
Oh, you had done it? Okay. All right.
I mean, I had a string of jobs where I would work my ass off until I felt disrespected, and at an early, and I do think that punk rock did sort of tell me, you don't have to take shit. Right. Like you can control your situation, or at least I tell myself that. Now, that might not have happened. Like that might just be and I mean the thing of in my head thinking punk rock taught me this.
Oh, right.
And it was really in there anyway.
You're
probably.
Thinking about it now, looking back, and that's fine. That's okay. So how does that then become 7 Seconds?
So Steve and I had tried to start a band. We did. We started a little punk band with a guy that I worked with at Montgomery Ward. He was really he just loved Paul McCartney. He was a Beatles guy. But we played him some stuff, and he's like, "Oh, this is easy to play. I can do this, because it's just..." Right. So we're like, all right, good. Well, let's do it. So we tried to put together a band. We kept arguing who was going to do what. Because
it was just anybody you could get at that
point. Anybody, literally. Like, I would have taken anybody that would remotely. And he really wanted to play in a band. He just didn't give a shit what kind of band it was, So I was writing just awful lyrics that were like... To me, they were shocking. Like there was a song called "Queen of the Third Reich," and it was just like it was like talking about how Eva Braun was like, it was just terrible shit. Like and it wasn't like I was trying to like, hey, I'm a Nazi. I was just trying to be shocking and stupid. And none of it didn't really matter because there was no place to play. Like there was, even if we rehearsed and got good, there was really no place we could play in Reno. and the best we could do is play parties, maybe. So we just kept kind of messing around. We tried out a couple different drummers. That wasn't working. But we came up with a brilliant name, and that name was the Misfits. And we thought, and that was actually, it was from a Kinks album called Misfits. And we thought, that's brilliant. We're Misfits. And then probably about 3 or 4 months later, I remember hearing I forget which Misfits 7-inch, but I was devastated. I was like, oh my God, there's already a Misfits from New Jersey. We can't use that. So then we changed the name. We had a bunch of different names. We tried to do a kind of a glammy, like sort of a New York Dollsy, Johnny Thunders and the Heartbreakers kind of, just snarly rock and roll punk. And because I could play that stuff pretty well. Like I was a guitar player. And at the time, I just wanted to play guitar. I didn't even want to be a singer, even though I was the only one that could sing. So yeah, we did a bunch of stuff, changed the name, made fake posters, we did the whole thing. Like I would send out a mimeograph, not even like there was not even Kinko's then. I would go to like some store and the mimeograph machine and have like a fake 7-inch cover, and I remember sending it to Kim Fowley. He passed away recently. He was the manager of the Runaways.
Oh wow.
He was a big producer and but he did a lot of he was like a songer. Anyway, he was sort of like Hollywood punk, and he actually wrote a very nice letter back and said, hey, thanks for sending it. I can't do anything, but anyway, it was just silly shit like that. But we just kept trying to do shit. And then finally, my brother and I met another guy I worked with at Kmart, and he was a drummer.
Wow, you went retail to retail.
I did. I worked. That's after I'd already worked at all the fast food places, all the casino restaurants that I could be a busboy or whatever.
Oh, wow.
I'd done it all. I mean, seriously, at some point I made a list, and I don't even. It was embarrassing how many jobs I had before the age of 21.
Wow.
But anyway, so yeah, we found this guy. I worked with a guy at Kmart named Bob Seeds, and he was kind of a stoner dude, but he was familiar with the Ramones and the Pistols, and he could play that he could play that style. So we got him, and we changed the name to X Band, like BANNED, because we thought it looked, like confrontational and scary. And again, we had no goal. We didn't know what we could do once we became a band, but we got pretty good. I still have some of those demo tapes, and they were actually really good.
And how old are you?
At this point, I was probably 17.
Okay.
And so everything was kind of going along, and then Bob went and joined the Navy and tried to get me to join the Navy. And this would have been sort of in the fall of '79.
How close did you come?
Not at all. I had no interest in it. No, like because I just didn't. So I just wanted to be in a band. I didn't give a fuck about anybody else or anything else. Like screw the country. Who cares about defending anybody? Fuck our freedom. Whatever. Oh, Jesus. I mean, really, that's it. I just was like so not really. Up on, it wasn't until I was probably 20, my early 20s, where I really started to pay more attention to the news. And I mean, I had actually registered to vote when I turned 18, but I just did it because I heard you're supposed to do that, and that's a good thing to do. But yeah, so he went onto the Navy. We were still called X Band. My brother and I were just like, we're never going to find another drummer that can play this stuff. And I wanted to play faster because I had heard the Dills from California, and they just had this like, just really fast, gnarly, and it was just a little more American sounding. It wasn't like they didn't have any accents. It sounded like me when I sang, and I just thought, this is cool shit, So I wanted us to play faster, but I didn't know how to make that happen. And one day I'm in Eucalyptus Records. My brother and I were looking through the little import section, which was where they put all the stuff. And we see this long-haired dude, green parka, tons of buttons all over. And he's just looking at records. And he's got a bunch under his arms. And he's just going, I'll buy that. So I just couldn't believe it. I was like, man, this dude he's got to be a punk rock guy. I mean, he didn't look it. He had a beard and long hair, but he had all these, and I could see... he had an X button, and he had like a X-ray specs. So I knew he was a punk guy. So I went up. I just said, "Hey man, where are you from?" And he's like, "I'm from here." And I was like, oh, "I'm Kevin." And he's like, "I'm Tom." And it's my brother Steve. And I was like, "What do you just moved here or something?" He's like, "No, my family lives here." And we just started talking. We spent 2 hours there talking, and we were telling him how we were punk rock fans, and he was saying, "Oh yeah, me too." And he said, "Well, why don't you guys want to come over to my house? I've got a bunch of records. And we were like, fuck yes, you know. So I don't even know how we got there. We must have, because I didn't have a car. We went to his house, spent the entire night. He had just like that whole wall, and then he'd already in that time frame he had a ton of records, but he was also into the earlier shit like, you know, well, obviously Iggy, but like, you know, MC5 and that kind of stuff. So I had heard of that stuff, but I wasn't that familiar with it. So we just spent all night listening, and he would let me just tape shit. I'd come over with cassettes, and he said, just play what you want, tape. So I was taping everything. He ended up, well, we told him we were in a band, and we said, we're looking for a drummer. And he's like, hey, I can play drums. And we're like, really? He's like, yeah.
What luck.
Turned out he didn't even have a drum. He didn't have a drum kit, had never played drums, but just wanted to. So he went right out and got a drum kit, and we set up at his mom's garage. Tom was his name, Tom Borghino. And we just started kind of banging out some of my originals, and we did like Problems by the Sex Pistols and da-da-da. This was the end of '79, and he said, you know, well, if you guys want me, you know, I can be in your band, you know, I'll play your band. I was like, all right. We just said yes, because we were like, we're not going to get anybody better than that. But he really got good quick. Like, he just started learning how to do the kick drum and the snare, and I mean, our early shows are really... Anyway, so we decide Tom's going to be the band. He has his little brother, Jimmy, wanted to be in a band, and I didn't want to sing. I wanted to just play guitar. I wanted to write the songs and be the guitar player. That was my thing. So he said, well, let's try Jimmy out. So we tried Jimmy. Jimmy was just a big kid, had a huge voice, kind of sang in tune. And at that point, we were sort of still X-Band, and then I just said, I'm going to change the name. And I was so into the Dills, for whatever, that band, the Dills. I mean, it's funny. I don't know why I was so obsessed with them, but they only had like 2 7-inches out. And they were also in the Cheech and Chong movie, Up in Smoke.
Yeah.
It's just a scene that I've watched over and over again because it was so influential. They're playing a sound check in the movie, and they stop, and I'm just like, it was so great. Everything was just sounded so good. But yeah, so we tried Jimmy out. Jimmy sounded great. He was learning my lyrics, and then I said, well, the Dills had a 7-inch called 198 Seconds of the Dills. And I was so obsessed with all the bands that my brother and I shared a bedroom. We had this huge weird desk that we'd made, and we would just graffiti it with all, you know, Generation X, 100 Punks Rule, whatever. And I had written 198 Seconds of the Dills, but when I wrote it, I wrote 197 Seconds of the Dills. And I don't know why I did. And it just sat there in marking pen, and I would just look at it. And then for some reason, just the 7 seconds part just called my name, and I was like, why don't we call the band 7 Seconds? And no one really liked it. They were like, why? It doesn't sound punk. And I was just like, I don't know. It's kind of like mysterious. Like, what does it mean? You know, 7, and it sounds intense, you know, 7 seconds. It could be anything. And later on, it's funny because even people like Ian MacKaye, and they've said, we all sit there and go, what does 7 seconds mean? And I was like, that's exactly right.
That's exactly what you tried to do.
I mean, it wasn't even trying to be, you know, cutesy or, you know, smart or anything. I just thought it sounded cool, so I kept insisting. I was like, we got to call it 7 Seconds. So finally, it was cool. And then Jimmy, just as a joke, started calling me Kevin Seconds, started referring to me as Kevin Seconds.
Well, that just, I mean...
Because you needed your punk name.
It's the of course moment of all time, right? Of course the singer Kevin is... Or, well, you weren't even singing at the time, right? You were just playing guitar?
No, I wanted to be... At that point,
I think Kevin in the band, so you're Kevin Seconds.
Well, according to Jimmy, I was, you know. So he was the first one to start calling me that, and I just said, yeah, I like it. I want a punk name, and, you know. So, and Steve was Steve Youth because he was always the kid. He was the baby of every little social sister. He was the kid. So he became Steve Youth. But yeah, that was the start of 7 Seconds. That would have been at the December of '79 when I think I came up with the name. And we just rehearsed like crazy, and there were moments where it just didn't sound like we were doing anything different. Like, it just sounded, you know, I was also trying to weed out all of this corny, shocking lyrics of Queen of the Third Reich and all this stuff. And I was starting to become a little more politicized. And I think it was because it was just as, and I don't know the time frame, but like, you know, I think Reagan was just starting to be looked at as being like, you know, the the front runner of the, you know, and the Iran, everything was going on, crazy. So I was
okay. So that was, I mean, I even remember the politics from that time, and I remember being told to be afraid of Ronald Reagan because that meant there would be a nuclear war if Reagan got elected.
Yeah, and
I remember for some reason, my school bus driver asked me something about it, and I said that I was afraid of Ronald Reagan. She said, "Why?" I said, "Because he's going to start a nuclear war," and I'm in the 4th grade.
Wow!
Right?
So that's...
and she said, "That's absolutely stupid. That's not going to happen. Like, it's not. You don't need to be afraid of stuff like that." And I was just terrified of stuff like that, you know. And we were a very religious family. Like, when we got into like junior high, my parents started taking us to like Pentecostal Holy Roller churches, and they were like, religious. Hell yes, he is, because, well, none of them said hell yes, Ronald Reagan's gonna start a nuclear war, but it was like, it's end times. This stuff is supposed to be happening. This means it's end times. So I was terrified. Yeah, just absolutely like,
that's some dark stuff for a kid, man.
Oh, so I mean, borderline abusive, if not even borderline. I felt like it was really bad. I mean, looking back on it, I'm like, oh man, but. You know, that's probably partly what led me into the things that I cared about later. Yeah. So what do you just gotta take the good with the bad.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that whole era was terrifying, because you were sort of already conditioned to believe that the Russians were just out to blow us off the face of the earth, you know. And then
there's these hostages, and the Munich thing had happened. That was earlier. That was
1972.
Oh, was that far back? Okay, I mean, I think I should have known that, but I mean, there was definitely all of it seemed to like play into this thing throughout the 70s and coming up to the 80s with Reagan.
Right.
And Ron Gardapi mentions this story all the time. He just dropped it on Facebook the other day about we were bowling and talking about Reagan. And I commented, and this isn't, I'm not the person who first said this, but I always bring it up with people that Reagan, the best thing Reagan did was created a whole bunch of great punk rock songs.
Oh, absolutely.
Like inspired a bunch of great punk rock songs, you know? And so you're getting politicized with the whole country arguing politics between Reagan and Carter coming up to the 1980 election.
Right.
And that is where the politics in 7 seconds comes from?
Yes, for sure. Because it was just, I don't know, everything was all of a sudden it was open. And I felt that I didn't want to just write, you know, she met me at a corner, you know, just this dumb rock and roll cliched bullshit. Like I knew I wanted to do more than that. I knew I was a thinking guy. Like I had thought about it, but I just would get taken out of it because I didn't know anybody else that was thinking about this shit. And none of my friends wanted to have conversations about anything. So I just I wasn't necessarily a smart kid. I just would dumb down my thinking so that I could just be a part of something. Because my whole young life, I just didn't relate to anybody. And punk rock just sort of galvanized everything. I mean, it just sort of said, here's probably what you want to do, you know, kind of pay attention to your surroundings and know what's kind of going on in the world, you know, and that just made sense to me, you know. And you know, having the Sex Pistols talk about the Queen and, you know, I mean, the anarchy and just things like that, you're like, what does that all mean? Like, What does that mean? How does that relate to me? I feel like I'm relating to it, but what does it mean? The other thing about the Dills that I love, well, and the Clash were really so political too, that I related to the just the intensity and just the sort of like proclaiming shit, like this is you know, and they even right down to the imagery of they'd have the flags for their backdrop and everything about it was just like, and they had the crazy hand, you know, all the messages they'd put in there. I loved that. We did that for a while, but yeah, they the Dills just came out and said that they said that they were communist, and I was like, can you be communist in a punk? And can you be a communist in a punk band? Like, aren't they the ones that are trying to kill us? You know. So I actually I remember got copies of the Revolutionary Worker, you know, newspaper.
You got to read up on it.
And freaked every friend out. Like I was just like, you can't do that. That's like that. You don't do that. And I was like, well, I'm just trying to understand. I mean, but I'm glad I did it. You know, I'm glad that I just. There was something in me that just wanted to know what was going on the other side too, you know, like the so-called enemy. I mean, later on I realized, well, I actually really lean more towards that than anything. But, you know, and even I've read interviews with the guys from the Dills and they're like, you know, we were just naive kids. We didn't know what the fuck we were doing. But it really did at least open my mind up to try and observe everything, you know, and Lord knows we had enough, you know, I mean, the movies, everything that was coming out was just bombastic, like, you know, America, love or leave it, you know, and everybody just wanted Reagan in. Everybody just wanted him to come in and just save everything. And, you know, it was just a terrible time. I mean, the only thing that I think that was truly good was the music that was coming from the underground music scene, and thank goodness for that. So, but yeah, we went into 1980, played our first gig March 2nd, 1980, at a club, just a little redneck bar called the Townhouse. And there's a dispute as to how the show came about, but I think my little brother had talked to the owner somehow and asked him if we could play there, and he said, "Yeah, I'll give you a night or something." And there are other people in Reno that claim that they were the ones that got us our first gig. And to be honest, I don't remember. I don't remember how it all came down. But at that point, Jimmy, our singer, had become Dim Menace, was his name. That was his punk name. Tom, our drummer, became Tom Munist. So corny. And then,
man, and he's the drummer. That's great.
And we all had to have our names, you know, and stuff. Yeah. But I have a cassette of that show, and I remember hardly anything about the playing. I just remember, like, listening to it. You can hear people in the background going, "You suck, get the fuck off stage," and it was just terrible. But one of the cool things that happened at that show was the majority of the people the only people that liked us there were 4 girls that were there that were right up front, and they were our friends from Rocky Horror Picture Show. And Bessie Rex was one of them, and Joan Jetson, their punk names. Later on, we became best of friends. In fact, I'm going to see Bessie when I go down to through Eugene. I'm going to stop in, and there's some work. There's some stuff, an attempt to try to document the early Reno scene, maybe in a film, definitely in a book. And they're going through photos, and I'm going to just pop in and see if I can, you know, check it out. But anyway, they were so into us and so into the whole idea that there was this thing happening. They were like our little fan club, and they would take us, they would give us rides to places. I mean, they were so great. And more importantly, I really do believe that because our early gigs were there were a lot of girls, like they would bring their friends, that it set up this thing in us to think that it was really cool to play in front of a crowd where there were women in the front and hanging out. So much so that when we would play other cities, there'd be no girls, and we'd just be like, "Where are the girls? Like, why aren't there any girls?" Because we were used to Reno had a lot of girls that would go to shows. My sister was really into it. So that was a big thing for us, you know, just involvement of women in the
right, and that comes through in your lyrics throughout the years too. Afterwards,
it was hugely influential.
Excellent. So you start playing, and it's when did it? So you've got a different singer at this point. When do you become the singer?
Well, Dim was a great front man. He was a big dude. He's the guy that's on the front of Skins Marries Guts, and he was an imposing figure. And he was a fighter. He loved to fight, loved to drink, and he had a huge heart. He was a really sweet guy. He's dead now. He passed on recently, but a while back. But he was just he brought a lot of heat to the band. I mean, he was a magnet for trouble, and I actually learned sort of how to fight physically, because there was just so much grief. There was so much going on with jocks, rednecks in Reno that would come to our early shows, or we'd get invited to go play some party, and then it would just be like a handful of friends, and all of a sudden it would just get taken over by and at some point it was either like, well, I could go run or I could back my friends up. And so I sort of learned how to just get in there and not be afraid, and hey, I just punched that guy and he fell, you know. But it was never anything I was into.
And this is like 80, 81?
Yeah, in between 80 and 82. Okay. When we were just still trying to build something. We didn't know what we were building, and like a little scene.
2 years, that's a long time.
Yeah, I mean, well, and don't get me wrong, there was like 3 times where I actually ended up being physical, and I never felt good about it, you know. Right. It's just never something I was proud of, and I never, you know, said, hey, I got kicked that dude's ass, you know, because I got hit a lot too. But I think it was just, you know, I do love the idea of there is safety in numbers, and I do love the idea of like you going to this place that's potentially dangerous, and let's just watch each other. Let's just stick together. Let's not look for trouble, but like if it goes down,
like you're some kind of crew.
Right. Well, you know, I mean, but it's a slippery slope, because, you know, it's like I have friends that have been in gangs, and they've gotten through it and stuff. And as much as I don't relate to being like a follower in a gang, I understand the sort of the brotherhood and the unity and the community, and like sometimes it's really just us against the world. We got to stick together, and I totally get it.
And you talk about jocks and rednecks. I mean, it was definitely like, we don't like the way you look, we don't like your music,
nothing.
We're gonna fight. Mm-hmm. In fact, if we see one of you, 5 of us are going to.
That's it.
And I was too young in 81, 82 for that. But when I was skateboarding, 85, 86, 87, like those years, like. Yeah. Up until Lollapalooza becomes a thing,
right?
And every jock is now like apologizing to the weird kids that didn't understand a couple years ago, because now they love their music. And Primus is a perfect example.
Yeah,
like Green Day, and all through. Jane's Addiction was a big part of it too.
That's a good point.
And
actually, you're right.
So, but like through those years, I mean, we'd be out skateboarding, and carload of guys would just stop, and we want to fight.
Yeah, and skateboarders got it the worst because
were you never a skateboarder?
I tried so bad. I mean, I always had a skateboard. I still have a skateboard. I always had it. In fact, my first skateboard, I still have it. It's an old Dwayne Peters Santa Cruz board.
Nice.
Like just wide ass thing. It still has all the original wheels. It's got a Mondale Ferraro sticker. It's hilarious. It's got an America's Hardcore sticker. It's got an early 7 Seconds Committed for Life sticker, and then it's got a Mondale Ferraro sticker.
Incredible.
But yeah, I tried so bad because my best friends were the best skaters, and guys that ended up becoming pros and just great guys. I wanted to be good at it. I just didn't have it. I just don't think I had the love for it to just really get better at it. And I never did any tricks or anything, To this day, every once in a while, I have a 7 seconds deck that a company made, a limited run, and they really helped me out. They put wheels and everything, and every once in a while I'll get on it and go up the street, but it's just sad, But because
it's cool.
Well, but it's so much part of the culture that I'm a part of, and I always felt like almost obligated to learn how to get good at it, because early on also we had so much support from the skateboarder community, and so I felt like. I should be better at this, but
you're right. Those guys were kind of like ranging out. They were the ones that were out in groups of 2s and 3s.
They were the ones that got it because they were out all over the place. And I don't know how many times there'd be a gig, and one of our little friends, and it was always the littlest guys. They would show up with a skateboard and his eyes black, and what happened, man? And he's like, "Oh, dude, I was trying to get down here, and these guys jumped me," and it was a big thing, and. Reno early on, we sort of understood that we needed to. So we were always big on graffiti early on. We were spray painting stuff, and we'd always do 7 seconds everywhere. And it was pretty early on before graffiti was really. And like we knew about the New York trains and all that stuff, but you didn't really think about it. So probably the most prominent graffiti in Reno for a number of years was just 7 seconds everywhere. Not just us, but our friends and stuff. And we would just, on Friday nights, a group of us would go out and just tag and go crazy. And it was terrible shit. It wasn't like it was like art. But it ended up
and it was red and black.
Yeah.
That's the lyrics,
right?
He
is. I always had a can of red and black. That was my thing. So corny. But anyway, we will attack in red and black. I love it, though. I mean, we sing that song still, and I love singing it. I sing it with just like, that's right, motherfuckers. That was us. But yeah, there was a group of like rock and roll stoner dudes that saw the graffiti and thought it was a punk gang. They just somehow they were at a party, and there were some people I knew that went to the party, and these dudes said, "We got to form our own gang because this fucking punk gang's taking over." And this, you got to keep in mind, this is sort of like, after Warriors and, that kind of, that romanticized idea of like, gangs.
Sure.
So they started a gang called Children of Defiance. It was a rock and metal gang. And they went and crossed our shit out and did this. And this is even before like colors were even new to cross it. They just wanted to cover our stuff up with their thing. And Steve, my brother, went to a party. It was like a punk where everybody's playing records, and some dude showed up, and I guess they got wind that Steve was in 7 Seconds, and they said, so you're in 7 Seconds, thinking that it was just a gang. And I was like, yeah, I'm in 7 Seconds, like thinking that, and they got into it, and like it caused craziness because my brother got into it and I guess kicked the shit out of this guy, and then he took off. And
so I want to set this scene. So, dude walks in and says, "Are you in 7 seconds?" Your brother, being the bass player for the band 7 Seconds,
right,
says, "Yes, I'm in 7 seconds."
Or somebody had said, yeah, that's Steve from 7 Seconds or something.
Yeah, I just love this miscommunication causing a fight where he has to beat someone up and leaving the impression that the gang 7 Seconds now has
that's right, and it
has beef with the Children of Defiance.
Yeah. So now the two warring gangs are.
This is awesome.
It gets better. So it went on for a whole summer. Like there was this thing where it's just, and we knew that we'd heard that this was gang. So I made comics of like the 7 Seconds gang. I mean, I thought it was the funniest thing ever. But the bummer thing was that they were singling out, they'd see a kid, and back then we were the hometown hero guys. So every kid would write 7 Seconds on their jeans or whatever. Skaters, we'd get this shit kicked in them. We were at a 7-Eleven. We had just played a show in Berkeley with DRI, and we got home that night late. We stopped at the 7-Eleven. We always stopped at the 7-Eleven and got bean and cheese burritos and Cokes. That was like our, okay, we'll see you next week at practice. We stopped at the 7-Eleven. It's 3 o'clock in the morning, and this car of dudes pull up, and this is after my brother got into it with this kid at the party, and the word was out that they were looking for my brother. So, and I don't remember if they knew my brother's name, but they get out of the car. We had just dropped Steve off, and they get out of the car, and they're like, "Hey, man, you know anybody from 7 Seconds?" Like literally, the band was there except for the bass player. We're looking for one of the guys. Maybe at that point they knew we were a band. That's what it was. We're looking for the bass player, and we're like, I don't know. We don't know what to say to you guys. Like, and a week later, they found out where my mom lived, which was up the street in this just terrible apartment complex on Patton Drive. They found out that my mom lived there, and that I stayed there, and that Steve lived there. And a guy knocked on the door. I was there. My mom made us dinner, and I was there, and I opened the door, and he was like. And the guy was being real suspicious, like looking in, and he goes, "Hey, is Steve here?" And I just instinctively was like, no, he's not. And then I saw another guy kind of there was like 3 other dudes like sight, and then I was just like, shut the door. And my mom, we had a bat, and I just picked, no, I'm sorry, there was a bass. My brother's bass was sitting there. And I picked up the bass. They smashed the window, but they never came in.
Oh.
And, they were pounding.
They broke the window of the apartment.
Yeah, they just threw like a rock or something through the window. Just maybe they used their fist or something.
Wow.
And then my mom didn't even have a phone, and I said, "No, did I say?" I said, "Hey man, the cops are on their way." Da 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 da. And then they finally left or whatever. So
you're holding the bass like you're gonna swing it?
Yeah, I just had the bass, and I was just waiting for him to come to the door. I didn't know what else to fucking do. And my mom was just standing behind me, going like, "Let's get them, if they come to, we got to, But yeah, that was crazy. And that is when I lost my mind, because I was like, they're coming to my mom, my little mother's house and fucking with us. So there was one guy that we knew in the punk scene that was friends with there was a band from their scene, and we just said, you tell them, we found out where they live, and I said, so here's your address, and we know where you live, and we will come back and fuck you. We were just trying to play it, and that sort of stopped. The minute
mutually assured destruction.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
The minute that they knew that we knew.
You took a tip from Reagan.
Yeah.
And you.
Yeah. Hey man, something had to come good out of this Reagan thing, right? Yeah. That was the end of it, though. They finally realized. That's when they were scared. They were like, okay, these guys have some kind of like intel that somehow they.
They're finding us now.
Yeah, it was dumb. It all went through like a summer. It wasn't even like, it was maybe 3 months or something.
All right. So does this story then end with all of those guys becoming your bros?
Yes, of course.
Of course it does.
And there was a moment. There was like 1 or 2 sort of metal bands that tried to go punk, and actually I think some of them became really good friends. But yeah, but that's kind of that kind of thing where we had such a small like scene that wasn't ever, we never were like, like everybody else had such great glorious scenes. We had such a small scene that it wasn't really well documented. So that kind of stuff.
And you needed those guys if you have a small scene. Like you don't have the jocks. There's one jock that thinks what you do is cool and can barely admit it to his friends. Usually everybody has that. Right. Then there's these rednecks who are just not, they're just not, whatever. They're just the natural jocks, right? The metal dudes, they're the dudes that are out smoking. Yeah. In high school, they're at the smoke hole. They're at the, and most of them relate to you enough through the way their music is, an outcast music form.
Yeah, they're outcasts.
That they're supposed to be your friends, but there's always a few of those guys that just hate those punk rocker skateboarders, and they hate that. And this has
they
come
just
up
didn't
in
like
this
the
podcast
look.
before, right? And those are the metal equivalents of the football players that want to have mohawks because they think it's cool, and they don't like the way their friends act. They'd rather come hang out with you. But they're jocks because they were born that way. Yeah. And so it's both of those groups cause trouble for their sides, you know?
It's so true, yeah. Exactly.
Except who cares about what happened to the football player side? Like, I like those dudes when they come hang out with us. They were cool.
Yeah, they ended up being pretty great. And they ended up being some of the most like passionate, really, really, really into it and stuff. It just took that kind of nonsense, you know. I don't know. I think that whole story was funny. It was all based on a misunderstanding.
Oh yeah.
You know?
Wow, that's fantastic. So okay, so Dim. Wait, I think at which point does Dim stop singing?
Okay, so early on, Dim stopped singing because he just couldn't. He would get drunk and then he would forget the words, and so I ended up doing most of the singing
and playing guitar and singing at the same time.
Yeah, I could, and I was on this big. I remember thinking I just wanted to be like Greg Ginn. I wanted to be like just a crazy guitar player, or you know Joey. Well, Joey should have sang, but anyway. So yeah, Dim just wasn't doing very well, and it was really hard for us because his brother was our drummer. And we talked to Tom, and we were like, I don't know, Dim. And he's like, well, let's just kick him out. I was like, okay.
Kick your brother out of the band, no problem.
So we sort of kicked him out, and Dim was okay with it. He was sort of, it was just fun for him. And then we just went through a lot of stuff that first year, you know, there was no real legit places to play. Some local kind of hippie guy, like there were college students, but they were kind of more hippie, and they played hacky sack and that kind of stuff. They had a great house in right in central Reno with a basement, and they somehow, and somebody knew them and just said we can come over and start playing. So the first few shows were after that first bar show that we did was in this basement, and we just called the basement. And then a few months later, they moved into another house just up the block from where my mom lived in the sort of ghetto part of Reno, and they had a big house, 2-story house, and then there's this little back, like a converted garage that looked like it was somebody had lived in it at some point. And they said, hey, you guys, if you want, trick this room out and you can just play here whenever you want and practice here. So we put a bunch of foam soundproofing bullshit, egg cartons, all that stuff. We built a little flimsy stage, and
it half worked, right?
Of course. And you went through some of the little, between the things. I mean, it was terrible. We put carpet across it, and then we graffitied the fuck out of it, and then we called it the Rad House. And that became, for the first year, that was the only spot. It was great. It was just in a predominantly black neighborhood, and the neighbors just didn't give a fuck. I mean, they'd see these crazy punk rockers, and they were just like, look at that shit, you know. And they'd come over sometimes, and they would, sometimes they'd have a kegger, and they'd just be like, hey, this is awesome, and they'd pick up on some of the girls, like it was just to them, and just like, this is great, they're freaks, So they never messed with us. They were totally cool about it. And that summer,
so you were practicing there and having shows?
Yeah, we were just playing constantly. And that fall we wrote a letter to DOA and said, hey, come play Reno. And they were like, how much can you pay us? And we're like, $150 or something, I don't know. They came down. They brought that band, the Subhumans, the Canadian Subhumans, who were amazing. DOA loved it. They loved the scene. They would just come to. They can go gamble. They loved the whole thing. You could drink for hardly anything. So the whole thing was just great. So they would come down. They were down. They told
that was the beginning of reaching out and connecting to other scenes.
That was where the idea of networking with other scenes.
How did you know where to write DOA?
That would have been. I think we'd gone to a Dead Kennedy show in San Francisco, and we met Jello, and Jello was a big, he knew everybody. And I think we just asked him, how do you get a hold of DOA? They had a manager, this guy, Ken Lester, and we called Ken and said, can they play? And they're like, next time we come down, we'll come and play Reno. So that put us on the map, because DOA were so pioneering and touring. Like, they were one of the early bands, and they were buddies with Black Flag. So we said, please tell Black Flag, because we'd love to have Black Flag. Black Flag said, we'd love to come up and play. So they came up. Dead Kennedys came up. So we were able to once we got those bands up, then that legitimized the little town up in northern Nevada. Like, we were starting to get a name too, because DOA and all of those bands were really kind to us. They saw us and they liked us, and they were like, why don't you guys come down and play the Mabuhay Gardens with us in San Francisco? And we're like, are you kidding me? That's like the CBGBs of the San Francisco. So we were so fortunate because we just made an impact immediately. I think it was because we were from Reno, and Reno was just like, oh, they're just hicks. They're just like these hicks from nowhere. Yeah. So I think that really appealed to a lot of people. I remember early on, people in San Francisco referred to Reno as being like Midwest. Like they thought we were Midwest, and we thought we're West Coast, like. But
yeah, no, we're right here with you.
Yeah, we're only just a few miles from. But yeah, that was the start of it. And then once that all started happening, it was just we played once a month at the Mabuhay, started playing in Berkeley, Oakland, Santa Cruz, and we just started gradually doing weekend stuff.
Okay, so what year is this right now?
That would have been late 80, early 81, I guess.
Oh, okay.
And at this point,
are you writing the lyrics?
Yeah, I wrote all the lyrics.
And you wrote the lyrics even when Dim sang them?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it was important for me. I don't know why. I just wanted to write the songs and sort of create.
So Dim was like, why do I get the Nazi stuff and you get the pro-woman stuff?
No, because we, back then, we
joking about the Nazi stuff. Yeah, I realize it's not.
And
real
we didn't
Nazi
even,
stuff.
and we didn't even. By the time we started to play shows with that stuff, all the X band stuff had been cut out. I mean, it was like just very like. I'm trying to think of, like, we had a song called No Pogo because there was a club in Sacramento that would spin new wave music, and we tried to go in there and pogo to it, and they said, get out of here, and they kicked us out. So I made a big thing, no pogo at the CBS. Our first demo, there's a song called No Pogo, but we had a song called Right to Fight, which was very war, anti-war, and so that was, my thing was just, it was all anti-war stuff. Like, we were just, I was of the age, draft age, so was Dim, so was Tom, so we really did sort of feel it. Like, there was this feeling like, they might try to get us to fucking, so, and everything was just so grim feeling. Like, the whole Reagan thing just made it feel like there was nothing that was going to happen. Like, it was just bad.
The first couple of years of the 80s is not the 80s that people think of when they think of it's not the John Hughes 80s, it's not the new wave 80s,
when we got
it's
comfy.
Still the late 70s. Yeah. It's just turning, the cars are even still kind of cool, like, but they're getting, everything is.
It was, radio was horrible, movies were horrible, like, everything was pretty bad.
Maybe
the fashion.
Maybe I've got that wrong about the cars. Maybe the cars aren't as cool. Maybe you gotta go 10 years back for that. But still, like,
hey, I had a Cars belt buckle.
No, I meant car, like the automobiles.
Oh, yeah.
But
yeah,
no,
yeah.
I'm off by 10 years on that. But I'm just thinking, like I remember that time, and now when I think of the 80s, I definitely think of the good economy, like stock market going crazy, and new wave music, and all that,
cocaine everywhere.
Exactly, like the style of the 80s and the crazy hair and all that flashy stuff. But no, not 81, not 80, 81. That's just.
It was like we weren't even ready for the 80s, and everything was just like, and all of a sudden I'm like, I'm a young adult here, like, all of a sudden I'm not a teenager anymore. But I'm still not old enough to, not that I drank, but I'm not old enough to do anything, except I could go to, go fight somewhere. So, I mean, I overdram. I was really, really fatalistic about it, and I was just, every song was just like, about, what happens, why are we going to, I was just taking it. It was really protest music. It was just like, my listening to my mom's music. But yeah, I mean, that was what we were doing. And Dim didn't give a fuck. He'd sing about anything. He was just he was just into it for the fun and fights. Dim was probably more into fighting than drinking, and he loved to drink, and he just loved to fight. He was a good fighter. He would take on 3 people.
Yeah, good guy to have on your side.
Always. Oh no, there was never a time where, I mean, if anyone fucked with us, he was he was like a pit bull, and he was great. Tom, our drummer, was the same way. They're both, their family were just tough people, and yeah. But so Yeah, we spent that whole first couple of years just trying to play wherever we could, and we were just having so many lineup changes. Like I was singing as a 3-piece for a while, which really was when we really started to key in on how to be tight together and play faster. My thing was I wanted us to be the fastest band on the West Coast, because my only point of reference was hearing the middle class 7-inch out of vogue, out of vogue, and that was just like, what is this, punk? Like it's so fast, it's insane, and I loved it. I thought it was the greatest thing ever. And this is probably 2 months before hearing Pay to Come, because we were West Coast kids. Like these kids have the different story. Like, no, we heard Bad Brains, so we were like, holy shit, we have to be this fast at least. So my goal was to try to get Tom to just please play faster, just keep, and he struggled with it, but he got really good at it, and then we became so fast that I couldn't sing any lyrics, and it was just, and I have a few tapes from that era, and I'm just like, oh, it's just terrible. I mean, we achieved what we wanted, to be the fastest band, anywhere, but it just was garbage, So yeah, that was, and we tried a couple different singers out. I would. But pretty much I would always go back to just singing and playing guitar, and it was the easiest. We sounded the best, and Steve and I and Tom just keyed in, and we were just tighter when we had the three of us.
Let me stop just for 1 second. We are over 2 hours.
Are you kidding? Oh, well,
it's amazing, right? And there's a lot more to cover.
Good luck editing that.
I don't think we're done. Part 2 is coming up, where we get into the 7 seconds that people are familiar with that release the records, and we talk about that progression in their sound, and about how they changed and how music was changing around the country, and how they got into making records like New Wind and the records that came after that were met with interesting responses from people. We get into that. We get into a real discussion about straight edge and Kevin's relationship to straight edge over the years, and that was a big deal for me. We get into just a lot more. There's a full episode coming next week, so come back and hear the rest of it. Thank you.
This podcast is a product of the Nobody's Knows Podcast Network. Executive producers David R. Larson and K. Drake Streetman. Music for this episode provided by Polymorph from the record Artifacts, Demos, and Debris.